Madam Speaker, I stand here in support of my legislation, H.R. 3993, the Calling Card Consumer Protection Act. I want to thank my good friends, Chairman Waxman, Chairman of our Energy and Commerce Committee, Bobby Rush, the Chairman of the Consumer Protection Subcommittee, as well as Joe Barton and George Radonovich, the ranking members of the full committee and subcommittee. As my colleagues have mentioned, calling cards are an invaluable resource for a number of people who make frequent long-distance or overseas calls. Students, members of the armed forces, and those whose family lives outside of the country regularly use these cards to call home. The cards are also popular among people who either choose not to subscribe to long-distance telephone service or who cannot afford it. They are a necessity, they are a necessary tool for keeping in touch with friends or family members. Calling cards that provide the services that the companies advertise can save consumers a great deal of money when they call home. Unfortunately, as my colleagues have mentioned, as we see all too often, a number of unscrupulous companies are failing to keep their advertised terms. I first learned of this issue about 3 years ago when I heard from a number of constituents who said that their prepaid calling cards were not delivering the number of minutes that they advertised. In fact, many were not even close to delivering the promised number of minutes. When I heard about these problems, I purchased a calling card to investigate the problem for myself. And what shocked me, although it should come as no surprise to anybody now, is that I found the exact same problems my constituents were having. One of those companies promised me a certain number of minutes, and I found that it was a complete fabrication. I did not receive even close to the number of minutes that the card advertised. This is when I decided to introduce my legislation to ban this practice. I've read studies conducted by states' attorneys general, as well as by independent groups, showing that many calling cards provide far fewer minutes than are advertised. One study by the Hispanic Institute found that on average the caller only received about 60% of the minutes guaranteed by the card. I recently read that the prepaid calling card industry takes in $4 billion a year in revenue. If the cards are only providing 60% of the minutes, each one of us can do the math. This deception is costing consumers and honest companies hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Calling card fraud harms segments of the population who are among the most vulnerable to being victimized by unscrupulous companies only seeking to make a quick profit. Companies will target poor minority and immigrant populations, and they don't stop there. They have even preyed upon our soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan. This is unconscionable. As was mentioned, there are so many ways that they use fraudulent terms. There are different fees. If you call and don't get anyone home, there's a fee. If you call and someone hangs up, there's a fee. There are all kinds of hidden fees in terms of what time you can call, what day you can call. It just gets ridiculous. In an article in Business Week magazine, the author detailed one example of a company that marketed towards Spanish-speaking consumers and had packaging with Spanish-language information. But the fine print was detailed all the various fees they would charge the user was in English. When confronted about this deception, the company simply said, "We're in America." They had the audacity to claim that even when they put Spanish-language advertisements in markets with Spanish-speaking consumers, they can hide all their fees in English. This legislation will put a stop to a number of deceptive practices employed by unscrupulous companies. It would require simply calling cards and advertisements to include a clear disclosure of all terms, conditions, and fees in the language in which the calling card is advertised. Just like the nutrition information on a box of cereal, consumers should be able to quickly and easily compare two products side by side. I would strongly encourage all the members to support this bipartisan, as Mr. Whitfield pointed out, well thought out legislation. I thank everyone for marking up this legislation today, and I yield back the balance of my time.